Everybody. Yep, we're on our own. Great. Welcome to this session. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about investment readiness in this session, and there'll be the three of us. I'm Ingrid Burkett. I run a social business called Node. We're a research and design consultancy focused on social innovation, and we use all of our profits to reinvest into projects within the social enterprise and community sector. And we've focused particularly in the last couple of years, because we've only been operating for a couple of years, our profits have been spent on capacity building and investment readiness. The three of us have also contributed and funded a report on intermediaries in the social investment space, particularly focused on social enterprise intermediaries, and in that we've got quite a lot of discussion about investment readiness. So I'm just going to make 3 points and then I'll pass on to my colleagues here. And I'm going to make 3 of the points that I think are critical. So in the investment readiness space in relation to social enterprises. The first point is that I think we really need to be careful about understanding what we mean by investment readiness, because it's something that's thrown around quite a lot. And when we first started writing that report, one of the things that became very obvious as well is that we were talking about investment readiness as the cover-all for capacity in the social enterprise sector. And I think we need a little bit more of a fine-tuned definition of, much as I dislike definitions, much more of a fine-tuned understanding so that we can really develop the supply and demand of investment readiness and the supply and demand side of the market. So I can't do anything without visuals, so I've drawn pictures of my points. So the first point is that we are talking about, if we're talking about building a market, we're talking about supply and demand. And what I see happening a lot in various forums around social investment is talking about the supply side. How do we increase the amount of capital that's available? I think we need to talk much more about the demand side, but also how do we develop a demand-led market? Because at the moment, I think what we've focused on is certain types of capital, and it's not necessarily matched effectively to the needs within the sector. So that's why my investor is standing at the top of the cliff saying, I'm ready, because I think Doreen last night made a very important point. It's not just about investment readiness of the social enterprises, it's also about investor readiness to engage in investment that actually is trying to deliver an impact, a social impact. And I've got the social enterprise down the bottom saying, I'm ready, but they're not necessarily matched in terms of the type of capital that they're ready for. So my second point is that I think we need to be really careful in the investment readiness piece that we are not associating lack of capacity with social impact. Because I've done a lot of work in the SME sector, and there is just as much investment readiness issues in the SME sector as there is in the social enterprise sector. So the investment readiness of the social enterprise sector, I don't believe is associated with the passion or the fact that we're concentrated on delivering a social impact. I think it's about the nature of the businesses, the size of the businesses, and understanding the connection between social enterprises and SMEs is really important, because we don't have to reinvent the investment readiness world. There are a lot of learnings that we can develop from the SME investment readiness piece that we can apply in the social enterprise sector. The third point that I'm going to make before I hand over, and we're going to leave a lot of time for discussion in this session, because we're really interested in what you think in relation to investment readiness. I think, and Doreen mentioned this last night, we've talked about it, we talked about it in our research paper, we've talked about it for a long time, that if we're going to talk about investment readiness, we do need to talk about that in the context of an ecosystem of social enterprise capacity building. So I think we have some parts of that ecosystem developed in Australia, but I think there's a lot more we can do. Not everybody is going to be able to go through an intensive business planning process. Not everybody is going to be able to, come out of formalised training. We need to have a range of options. I think the things that have maybe not been developed as well in the Australian context are the things like peer-to-peer capacity building, which, if we look at the SME market, that's absolutely critical. Networking and peer-to-peer relationship investment readiness training is critical. I think we need to develop that. Also, my acronyms, this was done very early this morning, so got very into acronyms. On the job, OTJ, on the job capacity building, and just in time, JIT, capacity building. Rather than taking people and assuming that if we take them out of their enterprises and we put them into a classroom environment, that's the only space in which we can deliver investment readiness training. For a lot of enterprises, that's never going to work, and we need to be able to catch up with this idea that people need on-the-job training and just-in-time training. So I'm going to hand over to Belinda Drew, who you all know because she's made regular appearances here today.
Just call me the pop-up panellist. Oh dear. I guess just connected, just to link in with Ingrid's last comment, I think that idea of peer-to-peer support in the social enterprise sector is enormously valuable. I don't know if any of you know an organisation called the Executive Connection Tech. It's a CEO's peer mentoring group. It's actually a worldwide group. But anyway, I participate in one, and it's full of SMEs, so small to medium enterprises, and the people that run those enterprises come together on a monthly basis. They sit around the table together and they discuss the hard issues, and they support each other in solving those hard issues in combination with some external professional development input and a monthly one-on-one session with the chair of the group. And I would have to say, in all of my years of dipping in and out of professional development, it's one of the most effective things I've ever participated in, and it is because the peer-to-peer process normalises your experience in the business, so enormously valuable. So we need a tech for the social enterprise sector, Ingrid. I'm going to be brief because, as I said, I'm the pop-up speaker here today, and you've heard enough of me, no doubt, over the last few days. So I'm just going to focus on sort of one central issue and then hand to David, and as Ingrid says, we can open up to questions. We're not a capacity builder per se. Foresters is interested deeply in capability and capacity. But if we do deliver capacity building, it's really embedded in the experience that we take social enterprises through. So we've spent quite a bit of time articulating what that looks like, so looking at all of the process points in our work and trying to think hard, and indeed even ask social enterprises what they gain from the experience, that's valuable and that helps them to develop their social enterprise further. Part of the reason that that's important, as we were talking about in the risk and redress session, sometimes you say no and you take people through a process that's quite lengthy, quite intensive, and if you don't have your eye to what you might be adding along the way, then people can feel like they've spent a lot of time wasted, and that's not often a really great experience if you're working in a time-poor, resource-constrained enterprise. But I guess I wanted to come to kind of the central point around capacity building in our experience and in our observations, and indeed it's even embedded in some of the conversations we've been having over the last few days, and that's that we often approach capability and capacity within a deficits-based model rather than a strengths-based model. And I guess what I'd like to do is offer a challenge out there to you all to start to rethink that a little bit. We need to seek out those exceptional examples and those leaders, but we also need to acknowledge that there are many, many people on the coalface of social enterprise on a daily basis with extraordinary skill sets. Now, those skill sets might not stretch to cover off all of the tasks that a social enterprise might need doing, but I can tell you those SMEs in tech, they're in the same boat, right? They are also, as Ingrid says, challenged to find all the skill sets that they need to be successful in their business. So if we think that through a little bit, if we take a strengths-based approach, then that compels us to be much more analytical and diagnostic about how we assess these enterprises as they walk through our door. And I think then further from that asks us as capacity builders to actually look at ways that we can understand the architecture of capacity and capability and then reinforce the great bits of that to make sure that that prospers and gets stronger, and then scaffold the bits that are weaker, find ways to plug it, and so then over time build enterprises that are confident and thriving and that have a sense of their own value and can express that value in the marketplace that we're creating. Thank you.
Well done, Belinda. David Brooks from Social Traders. That's okay. I'm not going to talk for too long because I think we started a bit late, and we would like to get some perspectives from people in the room around capacity building. But Social Traders, I want to give you a bit of a perspective on our work as a social enterprise development organisation. I suppose over the last 5 years, working with some 65 social enterprises, primarily at sort of start-up and early stage, and we, I suppose, distinct from Foresters, do work in, largely in sort of capacity building work. Our work falls into 3 areas. We do work around increasing awareness and understanding of social enterprises. So we've done things, like the phases mapping work and the Social Enterprise World Forum back in 2009, and more recently the National Social Enterprise Awards program. We do work around sort of growing the market for social enterprise products and services through things like the Social Enterprise Finder and Good Gift Catalogue, and also our work in social procurement. But the third area is really our work in building the investment readiness and trading capability of social enterprises, and that represents, the majority of what we do at Social Traders, probably 60 or 70% of our work, and that involves us running sort of a range of workshops and study tours, online tools and resources like the Social Enterprise Builder, which is a business planning tool, through to our programs like the Crunch, which has sort of been our sort of flagship social enterprise incubator program that we've been running over the last 4 years. And, it is a 6-month, quite intensive incubation process which builds capability of the individual and also develops a very rigorous business plan which, through a mentor support network, those enterprises enables those enterprises to then pitch that business plan for investment. And I think yesterday we heard that there is really quite a big job to be done here in Australia in developing a pipeline of investable social enterprises. We heard from the SEDEF experience that, of the inquiries and proposals coming forward, that perhaps only a minority, a third of those, are investment ready due to lack of business planning and strategy. And Paul Steele also talked about that this morning, and talked about the work that various organisations, including our own, are doing in that area to fill some of those gaps to access the finance and investment that is available. So, not here this morning obviously to make the case, because I think that case has been made very strongly over the last 2 days, but just to give very quickly some sort of observations and insights into what we've sort of seen in this area of capacity building work. With social enterprises, as you know, trading is critical to the social enterprise in terms of its financial viability and achievement of social purpose. But for many social enterprises, that trading aspect can be quite daunting, particularly if you've come from a community sector background. And so some of the things that we sort of, I suppose, see in the work that we're doing with social enterprises is, understand why you are trading, and having clarity of the purpose, and the role that trade will play in your enterprise is critical. Another issue is checking as you go into, at a startup stage, checking to see that you've got a product that people are prepared to pay for. And don't rely on sort of well-meaning supporting testimonials that you have a great product. You have to ask your customers and undertake that market research. As we've talked about, developing a business plan, we see in a lot of cases is a critical aspect to, and getting to know that business plan really well. Our approach is very much that the individual entrepreneur and organisations have to develop the business plan. It's not outsourced to us or to consultants to develop. Obviously, in the planning phase, structuring your organisation for trade is critical. There is no single legal entity formed for social enterprise in Australia, so each enterprise needs to select from a legal form that's going to best suit the needs in terms of social purpose and where the startup investment and funding is going to come from. And the last point I think is, that we see is often the inclination not to seek sufficient startup investment. So securing sufficient investment at startup is really important to cover costs, even those costs before you start trading, as well as the losses that you may incur in the first few years. So that gives you some insights into what we experience. We also think it's really important with a lot of the individuals and organisations that we work that we continue to support them in their early stage. So beyond startup for could be another 12 months or 18 months or 2 years as they receive investment and startup. They would then join our portfolio and provide them with ongoing business coaching support. We've been involved in, apart from the work that we're doing with startups, working with existing enterprises as well, and we've worked with in a couple of projects in Victoria and around Australia, working with enterprises around building their long-term sustainability. And we have just recently launched a new program called Thrive, which is based on some of the experience that we've had over the last 3 or 4 years, which is designed to help, operating and existing social enterprises improve their sort of long-term financial viability and social impact. So I think that's probably enough from us up here, but what we wanted to do, I suppose, is to really get some perspectives from people in the room, particularly from social enterprises here, in terms of the experience that you've had in using, in receiving capacity building support, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what that experience has been, and also it would be, I think, interesting to find out from particularly the enterprises as well, your experience of these 2 days at the social marketplace as also a capacity building experience. So I'm going to go and sit down, and I think our idea was, rather than to have individual table conversations, that we would just have people ask questions or make a comment about their experience.